Hello, Tom.
Howdy.
Hello, Joe.
How's it going?
It is going okay.
Let's make this meeting quick. I got a turkey in the oven.
Seems a couple days early, unless it's one of the ones from the west side.
Yeah, no. Just joking.
Tom, have you and your dog had to contend with turkeys on the west side as well? We can't hear you, Tom. There you are. Tom, have you and your dogs had to deal with the turkeys that live over on the west side? The wild turkeys?
I had a few in my backyard, but this was like 4 months ago.
Okay.
I'm over Lola Street, so I don't know. I guess they're everywhere.
Yeah, there's a flock that lives right near the Walton.
Oh.
They can be very, very mean, wild turkeys.
Oh yeah. Well, the one I had in my backyard was walking with one of its babies, so it was very protective. You ever see those things take off?
I have.
They're like a plane.
They have to run, yes.
Yes.
Dan, I believe my mind's a little wonky. Did I take notes last meeting?
You did. Well,
Yes.
you said you were taking notes. Whether you actually took notes.
No, I did, and I felt quite confident about them, but God knows where they are. For some, I can find them. Obviously, they're on my computer because I was typing as we went along, but they're not in the folder they should be in. So, okay, I will find them and send them to everybody. I apologize about that.
Okay, appreciate it. We will just defer the minutes from the last meeting.
Do you want me to take them this week, Dan? They won't be as thorough as Ann's, but
And you're on mute. We'll let that be your call.
Yours were perfect, Joe. So maybe we can like go one meeting every other meeting if that works.
yeah, that's fine. I could do it. That's just my attention span is very limited. So when I take notes,
No,
don't ask me any questions during the meeting.
no, that's okay. And it doesn't have to be. It's not like you're taking a dictation. Awesome. Thank you.
I'll take care of this week. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it looks like Maureen's going to be joining us. And we've got Tim.
Kate, Matt's gotta go home. Yeah, I just got a text from him. Send Matt home.
I muted you, Joe. As meeting is being recorded.
Oh, sorry. I
Whatever,
thought I
what, I
muted.
figured whatever it was, we didn't need to hear.
Yeah, I thought I muted myself, so. And then I looked at the computer and said mute. Oh, I thought it was also.
So we're waiting for one more member. We've got 5 of 10. I know Eric intends to try and join us. He's had some technical difficulties of late.
I just found the minutes, so I will send them to everybody so we can vote on them at the next meeting.
Excellent. So that'll be the second time of the minutes, so seconds of the minutes. Sorry, bad.
Yeah.
It's just time for that. And Maureen, we will move things around while we've got you joining us, so your time is of interest. I'm assuming you're here for chapter 56 and possibly 62, so we can get through those discussions.
Yep,
Excellent.
I'm here to discuss the town council part, but I'm really in listening mode, so I don't really have a ton to add, but and hopefully Bob is joining, who's the liaison.
Bob may not be able to join us this evening. He sent me a text. He is attending another event that is handling some emotional support for the tragedy that happened this weekend over in Colorado Springs. So he sends his regrets. Okay, and now that we actually have 7 members, we've got a quorum. At 7:03, we'll call the meeting to order. Joe has agreed to take notes, so he'll be the minutes taker for this, for I believe the second time. So sorry, couldn't resist the time joke yet again. So with that, we'll go through some things for Maureen's comment. She's here largely in listen mode, so we'll go through items as we have them. And Maureen, if you want us to jump around, happy to do so. But if you want to just kind of see how another meeting is run, that's fine too. So the first thing is public engagement. If anyone from the public, from a public perspective, wishes to contribute anything, Maureen, you can do that if you wish. Tom, you're welcome to do that as well as members of the public. Otherwise, we will continue to move on.
Sure,
Okay.
I can start. I'll go now, and then I'll you guys can do town council stuff, and then I'll leave. I just hi, Marion, but town council co-chair. I wanted to come on and thank you all for serving. Our town cannot run without volunteers, so thank you all for doing this. I did my first committee that I joined in town was the Charter Review Committee, very similar to bylaws, except it only meets once every 10 years as opposed to once every 5 years. But it was a really great committee to get off the ground. I have no doubt that you guys are going to have great updates with us. Thanks in no small part to people who have done this before, like Dan and like Eric. And then you've got my favorite former counselor sitting alongside of you. And so you've actually got 2 of my favorite attorneys sitting with you. You've got Tom and you've got Anne. So no doubt that at our next town meeting, you will have some great bylaws for us to vote upon. So thank you again, all of you, for volunteering your time. And yeah, happy to listen to the conversation about the bylaws having to do with town council.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate the comments. And we will be getting to chapter 56 in short order. So next item on the agenda itself is minutes for November 3rd, and just found those. She's going to send those out, and we will defer that to the next meeting itself. And so at the next meeting, we will likely have two sets of minutes from November 3rd and from the current meeting as well. So with that, we have tonight's meeting. The first thing is for the review itself. We've got chapter 9, which is if there were any updates. We have not received anything further from any of the additional public bodies. This is on the update on boards, committees, and commissions, particularly as it relates to general governance. It may become very relevant in short order as unfortunately one of our members has not been able to join us for several meetings. So that may become relevant after this meeting again. Moving on, chapter 36. For chapter 36, I believe there are some comments from Eric. Eric, are you able to, I see you've got a camera. Are you able to talk at all? Are you able to turn on the microphone? Looks like you're in the library. And I don't know if those computers have microphones available. We'll circle back while Eric gets technical assistance on that. Eric did send that he has some input on chapters 36 and 51. So we'll come back, we'll circle back on those. This brings us to chapter 175, streets and sidewalks. This is the information that came out of our last meeting. It was a great meeting with Theo Noel, the chair of the planning board, taking the input that they provided. We added some additional feedback to it. Tom Mullen went ahead and put his legalese into it, so it made it both understandable and legal in legalese that almost no one can really understand without being a lawyer. So it's a combination of that. So I sent that out, and Tom, I copied you on the note just before this meeting. The update, the only piece that was excluded from the textual update of that was the effective date that we discussed at the last meeting. The effective date being between 120 and 365 days, a date to be set by the town council. And otherwise, the update from town meeting, for those of you who were there, I know I saw some of you there at town meeting, is that this particular item was moved for indefinite postponement. And the planning board was very gracious in their comments. Theo did tell me he wanted to join this evening, but unfortunately is feeling under the weather and didn't have the capacity to join us in any capacity for tonight. He did ask us to send ultimately along a final copy of the next draft as it comes out of the discussion that we're having in this. So the item that is up for discussion initially is on the effective date piece. The other, all the other changes I believe were incorporated. Tom, if you want to talk to that and you're thinking on the effective date componentry.
Well, I guess I didn't see the point of making the effective date as far in the future as my notes indicated we had discussed. That said, if it's the committee's wish, then I'll do whatever. I'll incorporate whatever provisions you want.
Thank you. And just as a recap, and you've got the official notes, but my recollection of the purpose of the effective date discussion was to ensure that after a vote is taken by the town council, for those who may not have been aware of the issue, even though they should have received some notice, it is likely to get more publicity for a street that's being renamed, that gives some time, especially for businesses and individuals, to get whatever necessary contacts they have so that they can notify people in advance of the effective date of the change. So if a street is being renamed, it gave between four and effectively between 4 and 12 months for them to get those changes in order. And that way it wouldn't be an emotional decision that, okay, we're going to make the change effective in 14 days or 30 days, something along those lines. That was my recollection of the purpose of it.
And Dan, I think that's accurate. I also think, excuse me, that there was concern that we didn't want to impose too much of a burden on town departments who would have to effectuate the change. So I do think both of those reasons are why we wanted to push out the finality of the change to a later date.
And my understanding from Tom's in his comments back, the only concern of that is that the appeal period doesn't actually start, the 30-day appeal period, until it goes into effect. So there is the potential for an appeal, after it goes into effect, but that becomes in some ways a secondary piece. I would imagine that if an appeal is likely, it would be known by people fairly quickly, somewhere within certainly 4 months. Tom, am I characterizing that correctly? I don't want to mischaracterize your representation of that.
No, that's right.
So
yeah.
My thoughts on it, and open to everyone on here, that includes you, Maureen, comments. If a street is being renamed, I think we want to err on making sure that the people most affected by the change, which are those that are on that street, have sufficient time. I'm thinking if there's any businesses, even if they are businesses at home, they have the time to publicize the change, make the change. If they need signage, they have that time in there as well. And so I think that making sure that there isn't a emotionally rash decision by codifying it in the bylaw makes sense. If it does present a problem in the future, I think that at that time, if it turns out that that the timing does present a problem, I think that at that point it can come back to town meeting for further revision. That's my 2 cents on it. Others' thoughts?
I would agree for all the reasons that have been talked about and that we talked about in the last meeting. I think we need to have that period just so that the people being impacted have time to prepare for the change.
Others' thoughts? Joe, Tim, Lucy, Catherine, Eric, if you've got audio.
Dan, I missed the beginning of that. So was this brought up in town? He didn't bring it up on town meeting, right? He did.
No, the article was indefinitely postponed immediately. So this was just in the updates that Tom did. He did do a draft very quickly. So we have it. That was the only component that wasn't directly incorporated, and Tom did acknowledge that in his note to it. And so I just want to make sure that the instructions for that hopefully final draft are by the committee and clear, so that, as Tom said, he'll do whatever is requested, and then we'll let town meeting decide if there's a change that's needed. And
so Theo's going to do this at the next town meeting. He's going to bring it up.
Correct.
Yeah. Which is 6 months away, right?
Approximately. It'll be sometime at the end of April or May.
Yeah.
The beginning of May.
Okay. Yeah.
There's almost certainly going to be a special town meeting before then, but I do not expect this matter to be desired at that special town meeting. There will be enough overshadowing things that we'll want to keep that one isolated. That's in school. Sorry, bad humor does permeate our meetings. Others' thoughts? Okay, so Tom, the request is to add probably a few words or a sentence just to talk about the effective date. And then I think we can put this one for formal approval at our next meeting for the language. And if you can also send that to Theo for the planning board as well. And that way we won't be moving it directly. We'll let the planning board do that. And we will take a vote to formally support it. And I think that formal support will be helpful at town meeting. I'm hopeful, certainly. But it does show the boards working together really for the best possible result. Okay. Anything further on chapter 175? Moving right along, chapter 51 on reports. Eric, were you able to get a microphone? I'm taking it that you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Is that correct? Okay. The good news, Eric, is that we are looking, I did talk to Steve, and we are looking to move to hybrid meetings for our next meeting starting in December. So we will actually be in person for at least part of it, and that should address for the difficulty. Eric, do you have audio?
I think I'm here now.
There you go.
Am
Yes,
I?
you are. We can hear
Okay.
you.
Good. Do you want me to start on the chapter 51?
So let's come right back to it. I just want to go
Okay.
to chapter 56 first,
Okay.
and then we will circle back to chapter 36 and 51. So chapter 56, which is the town council. So to make things consistent for everyone, I will go ahead and share my screen here. It shows the there we go. Excellent. Now I can see everyone and I can share my screen. The power of Zoom, it does make things a little bit more challenging. So chapter 56 is town council, and Maureen, thank you very much for joining us as co-chair of the town council itself. This is a section that directly obviously impacts the town council. It is our attempt to try and contact directly affected parties of bylaws as we review them. We obviously do the public postings and notices, but when someone is specifically called out, we try to invite them to get their input because they tend to be domain experts about it. So chapter 56 talks about the law library. I'm sure this is something of extreme interest to Tom Mullen because it's a vast law library that has all sorts of information in it and the execution of official documents. So it was updated in 2018, specifically those updates related to changing of the Board of Selectmen to Town Council. That was the change that was made to it. Otherwise, Tom, do you have any thoughts on recommendations, particularly as it relates to the law library or execution? Since this seems to be a legal type of chapter.
No, I really don't. And actually, the reference to the law library is increasingly anachronistic. I have a lovely set of books dating back to the 19th century that I inherited from my predecessor as town council, and which I'll be happy to give to my successor. But I can't remember the last time I looked in them because all legal research is now done online.
So with that, I have to ask, because it is once again noticed that you are missing your robe and your wig.
Mm-hmm.
So Maureen, if you may or may not be aware of, but Tom has a different title in this meeting. He is officially the town barrister at his own request, and he's to be addressed as my lord. He's always wanted it, so in here we try to do that at least periodically, so that it periodically does get actually into the minutes and into reports.
Has he provided poems yet? Because that's what he does for town council every so often. We'll get a poem. So stay tuned because you deserve a poem.
I'll have to work on some doggerel. Okay.
Okay, so Maureen, as the subject matter expert for this section, in as much as there is anything, any thoughts on or potential changes that you think?
Yeah, Dan, I read it over and nothing spoke out to me. And I just want to, I know some people are newer to town and a lot of people are newer to this committee. Just to, you brushed over that 5 years ago, we changed all of it from Board of Selectmen to Town Council and changed chairman to change chairperson. That was a 17th month process. So even though Dan said it so easily, it took 17 months from start to finish with Ann and I starting the discussion in a town council meeting in June of 2017. And then 17 months later was the final vote at town meeting to change our bylaws. So it was a really big change, even though, it sounds like it was really simple. But I read over everything and I didn't see anything that I was like, oh, we really need to change this. And I'm looking at Anne to see with your 9 years on town council, if you saw anything.
No, the only tiny thing is on 56.2, I would change executed by the town council on behalf of the town as opposed to in behalf, unless do people say in behalf? That might just be a typo, but no, I think this is very simple. The majority of what about town council, Maureen, is in the charter. So I think I don't see any issues with this.
Tom, is part of to Ann's comment, is part of a omnibus minor changes. Should we change the word into on?
Yeah, I'm with Ann. I would say on behalf. I've got to say I have seen the use of in behalf, usually in older writing. I suspect this dates way back in our history.
Okay.
Is this chapter even necessary?
I think this chapter adds extremely little.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I ask is the prior bylaw review committee did actually remove several chapters that were deemed irrelevant. If this is not necessary, then it's just bylaws for the sake of bylaws, and it may just be easiest to remove it in its entirety if it's covered by state law.
Yeah, I mean, under chapter 40, section 3, the select board in a town, here our town council, has custody and control of any municipal real estate and would be responsible for executing any deeds unless there's a statute or a vote of the town that says otherwise. So that accounts for 56.2. And 56.1, as we discussed, the law library really isn't an issue. And the selectmen in a town, here our town council, generally are regarded as having inherent authority to dictate litigation.
So the only other piece in 56.1 that jumps out at me is the employee special counsel. So that, and what I think about is, even on our agenda, we have the professional assistance with zoning recodification. By bylaw, it explicitly reserves that to the town council. And I'm not sure if that would be implied or covered elsewhere. If it is, then what I'm hearing is that there may not be a need for this.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure we're not throwing the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't think there is any need for it.
I mean, I think if there's no need, I don't think we need to confuse an issue that's governed by state law and potentially touched upon by the charter to have bylaw on it, where it is, we already have, the town council has the authority listed elsewhere to do what's in 1 and 2. So I have no problem if we move to cut these.
Thoughts by others?
So you want to cut it even though it took you 17 months to revise it?
No, it took 17 months to change Board of Selectmen
Oh,
to Town Council.
not even.
No, these took, we didn't pay attention to these.
So you want to, what's the discussion to remove the whole chapter or just chapter 56 too?
To remove the whole chapter.
I mean, I guess it's fine. I mean, does it hurt to leave it in or you just, I guess I have no thought. I guess it doesn't matter to me. If you want to take it out, it's fine.
It just comes down to it when it comes to bylaws, there are a lot of bylaws, and I think that less is more. If someone is looking at our bylaws, trying to understand how the town is run, trying to learn about the town, as each of us have. And repealing unnecessary bylaws, I think, just reduces complexity.
So should you add town council to the definitions then? Or
Because the town council is defined by the charter itself, which supersedes the bylaws,
okay.
is my understanding.
If we can find if we have something that can be like crosswalked that meets all of anything that's laid out here, then it feels like it would be redundant to keep this. And I can't remember if we said all of these pieces have something that crosswalks to it that says the same thing, but at least two, I think at least 2 of them did.
Dan, let me just go back on something that I just said. Maybe it's just as well to leave this in, because what if, for example, we had school-related litigation and the town council wanted to settle it and the school committee didn't? It may be useful to have a bylaw that makes clear that ultimately it's the town council's call. And that's what 56.1 says. I actually ran into a situation like this in Linfield where the ZBA was the litigant and they wanted to appeal, but the Board of Selectmen didn't want to spend money on it. And it would have been cleaner if we'd had a bylaw like this, making clear whose call it was.
I think for that reason, then I would say 56.1 should stay in. We may never use it, or the town council may not, but it's in that situation, Tom, or
Yeah.
like Linfield, it's good to have.
Yeah. And 56.2 does pretty much the same thing. It answers any ambiguity. It resolves any ambiguity about who ought to be signing a document that goes on record in the Registry of Deeds. Again, I think that it's fairly clear from state law anyway, but in the interest of resolving ambiguity, I can't say this is a bad idea.
To what Lucy, okay, I have a question. I'm sorry, Dan. To what Lucy was saying, do we ever, I'm forgetting if we cross-reference, do we point to something in the charter that supports this, or they just exist very independently and people can kind of stumble on either one?
I think we do refer in some of our bylaws to charter provisions. I'm thinking in connection with the town meeting related portions of the bylaws.
Not sure that it references the charter directly, but it certainly is directly implied.
Hmm.
But from what you're saying, there's really no harm in leaving the bylaw in. It may provide clarity in the case that there is a conflict between boards that may have jurisdiction over an item.
Oh, Dan, actually, I think in 36.2, we do refer to the charter. It says, referring to notice or an annual financial meeting as defined in section 2-9A of the charter. And similarly in reconsideration, 36.15, we refer to our unique provisions for reconsideration in the charter.
So is the purpose and the suggestion, I think this goes to you and also possibly Lucy, that we should make a cross-reference in these sections? Or should we effectively leave them alone with the possible change of the word into on?
I mean, as someone who does legal research and reads statutes, I think a cross-reference helps. Very much so. And I'm certainly willing, as we go on the process, to maybe try to marry some of these the provisions in the bylaws with the applicable charter. But I think it's helpful. Tom, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I have exactly the same inclination, because like you, I have to try to make sense of this stuff every day.
I'm just gonna third that because I think if we're trying to make these bylaws something that regular Wakefieldians might be able to pick up and read and make sense of, people aren't necessarily going to know to go search the other document and see what else it has to say. I think it's just makes it more user friendly in general, even for people who don't do legal research generally, to help people understand where to go to find more information on the topic.
So in this case, it would be referring to section 3.2 or 3-2 of the charter, which is on the town council, and probably 3.2B in particular, which talks about the powers and duties of the council. And I would think that would again be a minor type of change, just like the word in and on.
Mm-hmm. Tom, could you have a general statement so we don't have to be so particular to attach it to 56.1 or 56.2 up where town council gives the history? Could there be a statement that, references the charter? Or does it have to be attached to each section?
Oh, we could just have a third section, 56.3, that describes the town council generally and refers to the charter. I think the most important thing to say here about the town council is it is just a board of selectmen with a different name. See, there are hundreds of statutes saying what a board of selectmen can and cannot do. There are a handful of statutes that refer to a critter called the town council, which in other towns means something different than it does here. Our charter expressly says the town council is a board of selectmen in all but name. So I'd want anybody who goes looking through this to realize, this is just a fancy name for a run-of-the-mill board of selectmen. No offense to you run-of-the-mill selectmen slash town councilors.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I didn't vote for town council name in that first vote, by the way,
Oh,
because I thought it would be confusing.
As you're talking to the town council.
all right.
And for the record, there are no ordinary town councilors here. Because by definition, co-chair Butt is a co-chair of the town council. And, and is a former town councilor. So neither of them can just be a town councilor. They both have official titles that extend beyond. So your point is well taken. I do think adding a section 56.3,
Yeah.
further defining the town council is otherwise known as a board of selectmen, referencing the charter 3.2b where it says the same thing, I think would be helpful for those of us who are trying to just get something done when looking at bylaws. So if we could request that to be added, that'll probably be a little bit more substantial than just the change of in to on, but I think also similarly meaningful. Others' thoughts? I'm going to take that as agreement. So Tom, if we can task you with writing that up as part of a chapter update for town council, it will stay. So Maureen, you still get to be a co-chair of a town council. We're not going to revert it to or change the name to something else at this point.
Well, and I
the name
just
is
want
great-
to, I'm not the co-chair, I'm the chair, Dan. There's no co-chair. So,
Okay.
but I appreciate you not taking any, changing that at all. So, no, I think that's great. I think referencing the charter just to, especially since it's all online nowadays and you can just click on something, I think that would be great. And I like the conversation of trying to delete things. And now you've got Tom adding another section. All good. That's how committees work. So it will be great. And then I hope the process, because I feel like I was talking about this with my counselor, Vincent, who's the liaison. So I'm hoping before we go to town meeting in the spring or whenever you're coming, whenever you are hoping to get this on a warrant, then you'll come in front of town council to kind of explain the changes. And we do have a Monday meeting, and I may, during our meeting and during matters not anticipated, maybe just share that I came to this meeting. And if any of my other town councilors have any thoughts, to reach out to you, Dan, as the chair. You might not get anything, but I'll put that offer out there for my other 6 councilors.
Appreciate that. And the intent process wise is absolutely anything that is referred to the town council to go on to the warrant, there will then be a presentation to the town council so that the council will understand what is being requested of this committee up by town meeting.
That's great. Thank you.
Anything further on chapter 56? So before you think about clicking leave, the other one that potentially affects the town council, because it is mentioned, is chapter 62 on the treasurer. I did reach out to our town treasurer. He has not gotten back with any recommended changes. The chapter 62 just talks about the assignment of tax titles and conveyances. And again, the changes that were made from my notes is just the phrasing from Board of Selectmen to Town Council. Those were the changes that were made in November of 2018. So any thoughts or feedback on this particular chapter?
So Dan, 62.2, which seems innocuous, it actually has a lot of significance because we construe it to mean that when we want to sell tax title land, we are free to do so using the RFP method, the request for proposal method, as opposed to just using the statutory auction procedure. When you go by auction, you just take the highest bidder. When you use an RFP, you can set criteria to, you can say, we want to sell this piece of property, and yes, while we want to realize some money, priority will be given to anybody who suggests one of the following uses. So we, let me just put in a good word then for 62.2, which actually does serve a useful purpose for us.
So an example of that, following on to a healthy discussion at town meeting, would be if there was a potential conveyance of property, it could be that preference would be given to someone who wanted to let it return to a natural forest. And so it might be that that person may or may not be the high bidder on a particular parcel of land, but it gives that ability. Is that a correct understanding?
Right.
Excellent. Otherwise, any other changes, proposals? This is again a fairly simple section, fairly simple chapter as the bylaws go. And for the assignment of tax titles, is that basically the ability to send that to collections? You know, 62.1 is.
Yes. In addition, there's a distinction between selling property that you have taken for the town versus selling just the right to proceed against the property, which we can do. So 62.1 authorizes us to sell tax titles as opposed to the land itself. I don't think that's actually done a lot, but it's harmless to leave it in. Who knows when, in what particular case we might want to use it.
I wonder, so I'll be honest that when I read this through, I did not understand what 62.1 was saying at all. And it sounds like Dan was also asking for clarification. If this is rarely used, maybe this is irrelevant, but I wonder if there's anything we could do to just, I don't know, break this into 2 sentences that are easier to understand, or do anything that would help people understand what this means.
It is very rare. I do, right? I mean, I don't remember doing this. So I do think it's rare.
Yeah, we usually sell land only after we have taken it, and not just a tax lien.
Okay. It may be irrelevant if it's very rare. I'll just flag that this, of all the bylaws we've read, this one was the only one that I truly could not understand what it was trying to communicate.
I guess I would be reluctant to tinker with it for fear of unintended consequences.
Yep. That's fine.
Okay, so no changes to chapter 62 is what I'm hearing. Tom, you're off the hook for chapter 62. A rare event, but it does occur from time to time. So with that, we're going to jump back to chapter 36 on meetings. And Eric, I'm going to.
Hello?
I know you had some specific recommendations for chapter 36 that you wanted to propose.
At the end of the discussion on chapter 36, it seemed that part of it is designed to be a guide for those who are new to this. And so you have a lot of short sentences. And sometimes later on, you see a whole lot of different topics all in one big paragraph, which is just difficult to understand. For number 36.1, I would start saying the first session of the annual town meeting occurs on a particular date. So I would say the first session. And afterwards, I would add the sentence, this meeting shall vote on the budget for the next fiscal year. I would put explicitly in there. And for 36.19, I would also say the first session of this meeting shall hear the financial report for the past fiscal year. So it tells you that it's all about money. Guessing what it should be for the next fiscal year. And then with the fiscal year in the spring ending, you can in the fall know what you just did in the past fiscal year. And I kind of use the word here because people don't ask questions anymore. I know people that used to ask questions just to keep people alert of town meeting. But I thought a bit more explicit, the stuff would be better. Shall I continue?
So let's take each of those in turn, just so that we can make sure we're giving that we're addressing the item. So the first item that you're talking about is 36.1 for the annual town meeting.
Yeah, it should be the first session of, and then it goes, the words right there, the annual town meeting. Or the annual election. That's because you can erect, that's when they used to elect the fence viewers and a lot of other people.
So my understanding of this, and I'm going to defer to Tom to clarify, is that by state law, the town meeting actually does do two processes. One is it sets the budget and it handles whatever other items are on the warrant. In addition, the town meeting technically includes the election. The election itself we do by ballot before we hear anything, but those are both handled from a legal perspective as one meeting. It's just when we convene together in person is what we're calling 36.1, the annual town meeting itself, is what most people think of as the town meeting. Personally, I'd be a little bit reluctant to dictate what has to happen at a particular session, because if something isn't ready, it may want to be deferred. Now, it may just be that this is directory only anyway. So with that, I will defer to Tom to give a better explanation.
No, Dan, you're right. But weren't we going to change 36.1 to deal with the date issue? I thought we were going to make it clear that the town council would have some discretion as to when the annual town meeting began.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah.
I think we did, and I remember commenting because we talked about this when I was on the council, to give a little bit of discretion, because we ran into something not too long ago that we were a bit hamstrung with the dates as mandated in 36.1. So yeah, I think we definitely want to give the town council some discretion on that.
Well,
The town council does have discretion by the charter, which obviously would supersede this. It's just a matter of making that clear, and having consistency would be, it definitely is in better interest.
Correct.
Yes.
I've attended town meetings since 1957, and there have been the first session of some town meeting sometimes has been to adjourn to the next meeting because there's a snowstorm and you don't want people there. There have been other cases when you adjourn to a later date because you don't have the cherry sheet from the state government yet. So it's hard to predict when you don't know what the revenue coming in is. So the first article can always be an adjournment or bringing up another article first because you want to get the thing through, passed, and have the time limit for a referendum but go by so that the town can act. So it's not carved in stone that you have to do something at the very first session other than postpone.
So are you recommending any specific change to the
Not-
language here?
My specific change was only that little thing I said is put at the beginning. And then educating the new people to put in the fact of voting on the budget sometime during the whole session of annual town meetings. Some of these meetings go on. You can start in December and end in January. Sometimes there are 6 sessions.
So Eric, are you suggesting that 36-1 begin the first session of the annual town meeting shall be held on?
Yes. Affirmative.
Oh, okay, but that misses
I'm
the point.
distinguishing the session from the town meeting, from the
Oh.
meeting, because really it's, well, kind of identical, but I don't know. I'm raising this question for legal counsel.
Well, that misses the point, though, of the first sentence, which doesn't deal with the town meeting. It deals with the town election. It says the annual town election shall be held on the last Tuesday of April in each year, period. And then we deal with the town meeting.
Okay,
So-
well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, I'm referring to the annual town meeting then and not the election.
Okay, and we've already discussed at a prior meeting how to change the second sentence of 36-1.
Okay,
Yeah, so as to deal with what the charter says.
And then you had also suggested something for 3619, the annual financial town meeting.
yeah.
Which this particular section doesn't say a whole lot, just talks about when it shall be held.
And there too, I think we changed it to deal
Correct.
with the scheduling issue.
And I think what Eric was trying to get at was to define the purpose of it a little bit more of what should occur. I'm not sure that it's necessary, especially if we're calling it a financial town meeting. The history of it is that we do a budget update. It's the question is, do we want to codify that so that becomes a requirement over time? And I'm a little bit reluctant to codify a practice that, one, it has a lot of longevity, and there's value in that longevity. I'm also a little bit reluctant because it may interfere with the business of a town meeting if it's determined that it should be deferred to some other time. You don't want to be hamstrung by the bylaws. And what comes to mind is like during the pandemic, when fairly early in the pandemic, when we were trying to get information from the state, and it was difficult to even close out the fiscal year on time just because of the availability of workers. And so I'd be a little bit reluctant to change and mandate something in the bylaws of what should be handled. That's just my 2 cents.
2 points. One is that it's called the financial town meeting in the in 29-A. 29-A is 2 paragraphs, one for the spring town meeting and one for the fall town meeting. My second point is that my suggested sentences could be in a parenthetical note, which would have no meaning or restriction or powers in the whole bylaws, but it just tells you what's really going on behind the scenes, or should usually takes place during the scenes. But that's my point. I can yield on all these points, by the way.
Okay. So are you suggesting specific language changes for 3619 that we should discuss in more depth?
I just leave it at the, as it is, and put my sentence, this meeting shall hear the financial report for the past fiscal year as a note only. Just saying this is what we do in the meeting, or just what we usually do in the meeting. I put in weaker language, usually here's the financial. The meeting usually hears the financial report for the past fiscal year.
So the town charter does comment on the November town meeting, town offices shall prepare financial reports. So maybe, to Eric's point, should we make a reference to that part of the charter? Just that gets at, I think, what Eric wants, just to, to make it clear what that purpose of that fall town meeting would be about.
Yeah, I like that idea, Tim, so I would rather not add language here, but reference the charter that goes into it in a little bit more depth. I get a little bit nervous adding some language if it's not necessary, but Eric, your point's great. I think if we reference it to the charter.
It's referenced there as 29 parenthesis A.
Yeah,
It's in there already.
I was going to say it's already there. 29A basically says if you hear financial reports.
Yeah, I think that's enough, especially where we call it the annual financial town meeting. I'm not sure we have to explain what that means. And then if someone wants to see it in more depth, they could go to the charter.
I don't think the charter describes that it's hearing the financial report. It's just called the financial town meeting. But my memory of that whole section, which I have problems with some of the language. Well, it's got the word financial. Anyway.
Well, no, it says shall be deemed to be the annual financial
Mhm.
meeting of the town and is expected to be primarily concerned with hearing an annual financial report of each town office, multiple member body or department.
Yeah.
So I've shared that portion on
Yeah.
screen. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like those issues are actually already addressed,
Yeah.
which is good, and it's good to bring them up.
Okay. I have a list in front of me, which I think you have also, Dan, because I sent it to you by email.
Okay, next one you wanted to go over?
36-3 talks about the order of procedure. And the question came up about the consent agenda. Is the listing of the items in the consent agenda separate from the warrant, or is it just the first article of the warrant?
Great question. That's something we have already discussed, and we've requested that there be language that allows for specifically by bylaw that allows for the consent agenda.
Yeah.
And it will address that. So yes, you're right on target that's something that is already planned to be addressed.
And it's usual that it be a first item. When you look at the finance committee bulletin, the first page says to do the budget, and then there's a whole empty page. Then you go into the budget on the next side page. So here you put the consent agenda in and use up some of the space. Now there's a possibility of having something before the consent agenda. And we did that the first time because we had to create something known as the access funds for WCAT. And so how could it be in the work on it when you hadn't even created the line item yet? That was my point. Chelmsford had this feature 2 decades ago, and maybe consent agenda is defined in Robert's rules. Oh, just say when it appears, and because we say it appears, therefore we have created it. And created in the bylaws.
So consent agenda, we have already requested previously that be a part of an update. We're also waiting for additional pieces to be, and additional suggestions on this entire chapter from Bill Carroll, who's the moderator. And he has not submitted any additional changes thus far. So far, he likes the changes that have been proposed regarding consent agenda, regarding allowing for the votes, especially of 2/3 and so forth, to be called by the moderator with a request that there be the ability to have an appeal by members if they want to count.
Okay, next question.
Go for it.
Section 36-7 talks about immediately calling for a vote if some people question the moderator's thing. I've seen this only once, and the moderator said, well, I looked long enough. And so the wording in the language has the word immediately, and I suggest a specific time, like 30 seconds or something. It takes time to realize what happened. You look around, you say, hey, all the people around me voted the way I did, but people in the rest of the auditorium did not. So I think the moderator was a little quick at that time. And I thought the way to handle this was putting something definite in place of the word immediately.
Tom, thoughts on how this issue can be addressed?
Yeah, I've always understood immediately in this context to mean before you move on to the next item. And I don't know about putting a time limit on it, because then, I mean, somebody's got to get a stopwatch then and check how many seconds are elapsed after every vote. And frankly, town meeting takes long enough as is. I wouldn't want to have to pause for half a minute after every vote.
Well, when you move on to the next article by when the moderator says article such and so, and that's done it. So it's when he says the word article, he's closed the consideration of whether you should count it or not.
Well, again, I think immediately doesn't refer to a specific number of seconds and probably shouldn't. It does refer to the order in which things happen. And so if you wait to question the vote until after the moderator has moved on to the next matter, I'd say you've waited too long. Also, we really don't want to be encouraging people to do this. You know, most people who question votes are cranks and should be encouraged to move to another town.
Okay, I'll go to the next thing. Okay.
I hear Linfield is
Oh,
inviting
no.
no. What other towns do you work for?
Yeah, there's a list of 6 towns they should avoid.
I'm looking at line 36-9. I see the question, the words lay on the table. In some towns, the word lay on the table means the same thing as indefinite postponement. If you, for legislation in the great and general court, they don't turn down whatever law you suggested, they say, we'll send it to a study committee, which never meets. So I was wondering about the meaning of lay on the table in this Wakefield town meeting. It's a way, I think, of, you're talking about something and then you're going, I made a motion of this once because we're spending a lot of time writing a new motion with the town council, and I thought we could go to another article in the warrant and then go back to this one after the proposed new language of amendment was done. But that was my thought of the reasons for lay on the table. You put it down because you need something done, and you might as well do something useful in the time until you can do that.
Yeah, so I agree with Eric. I've never seen a motion to lay on the table in our practice. I think, though, that the meaning of it is suggested by the clause that follows it, to lay on the table, comma, to take from the table. So the way I understand it is, if for whatever reason you don't want to go on right now with the discussion, but you want to pick it up later, you would move to lay Article 6 on the table. And if that passes, then you go on to Article 7. And at any point thereafter in the meeting, somebody can say, I move to take up from the table Article 6, and you go back to it. But I agree with Eric. I've never seen it done.
I've never seen it done in Wakefield. It is a part of Robert's Rules of Order that can certainly be done. It is not a physical laying on the table, although the tables are big enough and probably strong enough to hold any individual there. That's not what it's referring to, just to be clear. But it is in concept of taking a bill and laying it on the table, and then in concept taking the bill off the table. That's what it is in relation to it. I believe that particular piece actually comes from the, my lords, dear England. I believe it would come from Parliament, where a lot of the rules originated. So that's the concept of it. I'm not sure that a change here is needed in practice. This is really used only for vote on motions that are about indefinite postponement or other motions that put something into a state on which we are not addressing it, or the motion to adjourn it which occasionally happens. And I have, for the previous question, which is technically usually called in Wakefield, where people just want to move to a vote, that's asking for the previous question. That keeps the debate on should we vote to a minimum, which usually is, yes, we're tired of talking, or no, we want to let people talk. That's those discussions I've seen, and I think that sums up the positions pretty clearly from everyone that I think I've ever heard talk on those issues. Others who've been at town meeting, thoughts? I'm not sure that a change here would be needed unless we were looking to change the time limit, because this is a different time limit than other items where you are limited to 5 minutes.
I am content with the way it is now.
Okay, next item.
Going back to 36-3, the question came about, you got a big item in the town warrant, and when is it going to come up? Like something about school buildings taking on Lanai Island, doing something like that. And the way I suggest is you make it a special town meeting for that particular purpose. You start it at 8 o'clock so you can do other business in the half hour before then. And then by that time, you've got all the people that are interested in it present. And then you can act at that given time. This way, you know when to pay the babysitter. This time, there might be a little expense because you have a separate warrant for the special town meeting, but you're saving the town of the time of the people who are especially interested in this article.
So to
So it's a
paraphrase,
suggestion that there's a way to go about this, and I don't know how to suggest doing special town meetings other than having the people hear me say this and hope they remember.
so Eric, if I think of what you're trying to get at is for items that are known to be of particular importance, to have those to have the discussion on those begin at a defined time, so
Yes.
that it doesn't, people who are only interested in that particular article know when to arrive. You obviously won't know when to leave because based upon the discussion. And I imagine there are several ways to address that. Tom, I'd leave it up to you as to potential ways to address it. And I'm not sure whether it's wise to address it in the first place. But if there are ways to address, so that if there is, say, a discussion about, say, an energy park, and people are particularly interested in that, they'll know when to have that discussion. Or if there's a discussion about a potential debt exclusion, if there's other items on a warrant, to know when to show up.
Well, we can't, through a bylaw, legislate about what is and isn't on a warrant, because people are always free through a petition to put anything they want on a warrant. So I think the best you can do is give people, as 36.3 does, a mechanism by which they can reorder what's on the warrant. And it takes a 2/3 vote to do that.
I also would be concerned that certain groups would identify their issues as, their articles as very important to them. And so who's then the arbiter deciding which articles can be called out to be identified as a specific time? I know, and Eric, I really appreciate you trying to help folks who are trying to only come to the meeting for what's important to them. But I think part of town meeting is kind of too bad. Town meeting is exhausting, and we've all sat through parts of it when we were very much interested in one small vote. And I think that's kind of the nature of the beast. So I would just be a little bit nervous if we started micromanaging those issues. As Tom said, if there's a significant issue that you want to bring forward, you can ask for a 2/3 vote. But I do appreciate trying to make it easier for people.
I think part of my point was that the town council itself could suggest that this big ticket item be in a special town meeting and set it up for that purpose. So that it would be done not from the voters present at the meeting, but by the town council plural itself. But I've made my point.
Yeah, I think town moderator would not be happy with that. I think that's getting into little jurisdiction, what the town moderator does. I'm not sure if he would support that, but I do, appreciate trying to give people a heads up when a vote is coming. I'm just not sure I would move to change that language.
I have another final point here, and it's just a comment. During the first 3 decades I attended town meeting, we raised our hand at our seat, and one of the pages, a high school student would bring the microphone on a cord to the speaker. The next thing we had a standing microphone in each aisle to which the speaker went. This was a convenience for WCAT because they could put the camera at one spot and not have to move it around depending on how far or how near or at which angle in direction the speaker was. And now with regard to people who are disabled, the old meetings, buildings that we met at had no place in the middle like the Galvin School has. So you either, if you had a wheelchair, you had to be down front because otherwise you're on a sloping floor. And now with the Galvin, we have this middle space flat in the middle, so wheelchairs could go that easy. So perhaps we meet the question of the disabled, which this committee was discussing a few meetings ago. Thank you. And
Thank you, Eric. And we have put in a request to update that language specifically so that it does give the moderator more discretion as to how to recognize people, especially if there is a disability or other reason by which someone is not able to address the question. And because you're absolutely right. Some people cannot speak, cannot stand. So, and as you saw earlier this meeting, you may be able to listen and not speak. And so you may need an interpreter other ways. So that's certainly contemplated, and those are open requests. And I anticipate that at some point when Tom is not overly busy with other things, he'll have time to work on some of those pieces. I believe that's what happens on Black Friday. It's either Black Friday or the day after Christmas, somewhere around there. Do I have that about right, Tom?
Yep, that's good.
But really, really good comments. Anything else on chapter 36?
well, I had one more point. The question was raised, you vote on an issue and there are 98 people for it and 2 people against it. But it needs to be counted for bond council. And so the question is, how do you do it? Do you start again and the moderator counts for all the people that are for it, and then he counts the 2 that are against it? Or once he sees there are 2 against it, he carefully puts his hand and counts 1, 2. I count 2. Now I call for the vote for those that are for it. And he counts and he stops at 20. He says, there's a 2/3 majority. I don't have to count any further. And so he saved a lot of time. And he can predict how many, the largest possible number that are for it, because the town clerk has kept track, the tellers have kept track of how many people signed in. So you save a lot of time of counting, it could be 1,000 people. I've seen.
So Erica, I'm cutting you off on that because we've already addressed that point,
Okay.
and that is a specific recommendation. So
Okay,
that
thank
the discretion is there, and there is the ability to also, if 7 voters want a full count, then they do have the ability to request it.
Okay.
So it's specifically for the 2/3 votes.
Yep.
for that purpose. So it's a good point. Anything else on chapter 36? And again, this one will stay open as we're still requesting feedback from the town moderator, who may have feedback based upon the last town meeting. Okay, with that, last item that we have on our regular agenda is chapter 51, which I know, Eric, you also have a few things to discuss here. Is this,
Yeah.
I know, is one of your favorite chapters, the annual reports.
Well, while you're putting 51 on, let me say that I inherited from my grandparents the town reports beginning in 1901 and 1910, when my uncle and then my father were born. And when you look at those reports, those who were elected to the school committee or to the library, some of them were women. Women could not vote, but they could be candidates for these 2 offices. And
Thankfully, they can be both. They can do both now.
yes. Yes, so you go through the town report. Where's my sheet of paper?
And I just want to make sure that we're specific to the bylaws themselves.
Yes. We had the case of, the town meeting voting in, 08, for more money for the schools than could be allowed for under the Proposition 2.5 limit. And the chair of the finance committee said, "You can't do that." But the town meeting went ahead and did it anyway. And then the taxpayers went out and got signatures to do a referendum on this, which was totally unnecessary, pointed out. And it turned out the day after the town meeting voted that way, the moderator appeared at the meeting of the Charter Review Committee, and said this was all wrong and so on. And I had done it wrong because I followed what the town report said. The town report had created something known as what you do at how voting is done. And it was wrong in two places. It did not refer to the project you do under Proposition 2.5. And it also said that town meeting was run by Cushing's Manual, which the charter 10 years earlier had changed to Robert's Rules. So I was very embarrassed. So I took the old procedure at town meeting from the back of the report and submitted it to Tom Mullen, and he made good changes. And I looked at it for an hour and I adjusted it a little bit. And so we have this thing, which shows up backwards on the screen. But anyway, it shows the length and it appears in the annual appropriation. So I wanted to have that appear also in the town report, which is, most of these things, they're thin, you throw it away afterwards, but you keep the town reports. And, but it doesn't really say much. So you have the town report as a start. I'm sorry.
So what I'm just trying to get at what the requirements, the bylaw
Okay,
talks
so
about the sections of the by, but not the content within the sections.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
content within the section really is determined by the town administrator or those who are assigned specific sections.
Yeah,
So the purpose of the bylaw, as I understand it, is to talk about the types of content, but not to get into the level of details to what the content itself is.
correct,
Is
correct.
is that a fair characterization?
Yes, yes. So I would like to change the word heading at the top. It says how it's done in Wakefield. And I would say to change it to how voting is done in Wakefield. And then on the rest of the top line, I would put in the town's website, wakefield.ma.us. And you have a line item in this section that says the town's website. So that can be deleted and replaced by putting it in the new title you have. Okay? That's one suggestion.
Although, okay, there are multiple websites that the town does use and maintain.
Yes, but I think they may all stem from this one, which refers.
They
to
do
the
not.
other. They do not.
They do not. No.
Well, then we should retain the list of websites then. Okay. Now I come to the question of cable TV and how you keep this going. Now, I was interested in cable TV way back when the town granted the license to the Lake Department. And had a committee go together, and they suggested that the town should run the cable TV access and local origination, and it turned out to be essentially the same as it is right now. The Lake Department later turned back the license, and we had cable companies submit applications. I was chair of the advisory committee then. And so we had a decade of fighting with Warner to get them to obey the contract. And so we created WCAT, and now we have WCAT for the first time in the annual report. So we should mention WCAT-TV in the annual report. Also, there has been created a cable television public access enterprise fund following state law. There is probably arguments between the cable company and the local towns and cities about how to keep track of stuff, and the state cable commission, I am guessing, set up this process so that it's all done uniformly. So those who judge obeying or not obeying have the same process to look at.
So I'm just gonna try and
So should we mention?
I'm just trying to figure out what should be a part of the annual report itself, because WCAT is a nonprofit. It's an independent 501c3 organization. The CATV advisory committee is a separate board that is appointed by the board, by the town council, CIL. So I'm just trying to figure out what piece, because I don't think we identify any individual funds in here. We do have a report of the town accountant, which gets into different fiscal summaries, and that's where I would expect if it's a revolving type fund, that it would be listed. I'm just trying to figure out for this particular section of the town report, what should be added, deleted, changed, just so that we're getting to something specific, if that makes sense.
Well, when I was chairman of the committee for a decade, I also wrote the annual report. I was careful to mention, we just had the one cable provider, and I tried to mention the number of subscribers we had and what was going on all over the place and who the cable company is. Now we've got 3 cable companies, and we had a report in 2007, which lists the 3 cable companies, the number of subscribers, where the money is, the cable company, and so on. So that, and it would list any problems you really had in doing the with the cable company about the basic process, because it was still a new thing and it's been set up now. So I also, once you know how many subscribers you have for each cable company, you should also know somewhere the number of occupied housing units in town so that you can see how it's going. It seems to me that the number of subscribers is going down a little bit, and the number of occupied units is increasing because all of the building that we see around. And
so I just want to
so I'm
try
saying
and,
that some kind of summary of these numbers should appear in the annual town report. And the question is, what's the title of the entity that does that?
so the CATV advisory committee might be responsible for that. Historically, it does not actually get that much information because it serves as advisory to the town council for contracts. There are 3 contracts in town. The CATV advisory committee has met once in the last 13 years, and that was earlier this year. And it did submit a report, as you know, to the annual report. It actually already has a report ready for the next annual report, just so that it will cover both the prior year and present year in which it has met. So those have already been submitted. The number of subscribers is actually in reality going down dramatically. There are very few cable television subscribers left in town of significance. For example, RCN, last time I requested it, was less than 100 subscribers across the entire town that had cable television. There's very little that they make on, very little money that they make and interest they have in cable television. They do have a lot of subscribers for their internet service, and that's significant, but that is outside of the scope of CATV or actually really any board for that purpose. So I'm just trying to figure out number of occupied housing units and so forth would be something that it could be useful information, although I'm not sure that there's a single entity that would actually know the number of units, let alone number of occupied units. The board, the building department would know the number of properties that have permits and the number of families that are permitted at each property, but that really doesn't get to occupancy along those lines. So I'm just trying to, again, the level of detail, we're trying to keep it a high level here. So if a department wants to provide more detail, it can. If it doesn't have the resources to do so, or if that level of detail isn't available, it just won't be provided. Just from a bylaw perspective, if we get too prescriptive, it will only be directory anyway. So there's not a penalty for not following it. And if we get too prescriptive, it'll most likely backfire further and diminish the value of the annual report. So that's where I'm just trying to make sure that we're doing other things. I think the next thing you may be getting to, maybe something that is worth considering adding. So if you want to move on to that.
This is a picture of the graduation exercises in 1962. And it seems to me that what the town does is maintain itself, but the big output of itself is its graduates. It's a celebratory thing, and I think 1 or 2 pages to contain these exercises would be a good thing. So I would add to the list in the education portion a copy of the high school graduation exercises. Then I would go down further and we have a report of the New England Vocational School. We should add there also a list of the Wakefield graduates from the New England Vocational School. So that's, I think, a positive, clearly understood line item. And I go down to finances.
I just want to pause for a second. So what you're suggesting, we already have a list of the high school graduates under education. When you talk about
from the Wakefield High School.
Under Wakefield, right? So for Wakefield, probably should say Wakefield Memorial High School graduates to be more specific for education, so that it's not all high schools that for Wakefield students. Although I think that's implied since this is a municipal report. When you talk about the graduation exercises, what specifically are you meaning beyond these 2 lists that are in here?
Well, you just said, who the valedictorian gave an address, various members of the school committee gave an address, and you just say what they spoke and who provided the music and so on. It's a celebratory thing. You go in there, you get a program consisting of 2 pages, and then you look at it, and that tells you what to do, and you have that as a reminder of what took place.
Okay, I would say,
I think
my personal my suggestion to that, because this is not a exclusive list, it can be expounded upon by the education. department. I think that that's something that could certainly be added to the education department, but I'm not sure that we'd necessarily want to mandate it to be there by bylaw, because there are changes that occur from year to year in how graduation is handled, and it's continuing to evolve. So with that, I think again, there's nothing that would exclude it from being provided, but I'm not sure that we necessarily want to include the actual speeches by a valedictorian. If a valedictorian goes off script, and that it does happen, then we'd have to have a transcription potentially of what they said. That would incur a cost or be not accurate. So I'm a little bit nervous about going down that road.
No, I think you misunderstood me. I just say, you have there, it says the valedictorian gave an address and gave, add a several words as a title. That's it, period. One little line, not a whole.
But my point here is that I'm not sure that needs to be mandated by bylaw. It can be provided at the discretion of the school committee and superintendent, who provides the data for this section. I don't think we want to because otherwise we're mandating that they have to have graduation exercises, how they're conducted, or something would be taken from that. Because there is you may or may not be aware, there's an active movement to get rid of the concept of a valedictorian, salutatorian, and education is changing. So to do something along those lines, I think would be infringing upon the education side of things. Now, one of the other things you did mention is who the list of high school graduates from Wakefield for the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational High School. That may be something that can be added. I don't know if that is readily available from the vocational school. Does anyone on here have any knowledge of whether that's readily available by town from the Voc?
I don't know, but I imagine it's a really easy sorting function. I'm with you. I'm hesitant to mandate a school to do something via our bylaws. But I do think it's something that probably could be accessed fairly easily.
I think it's something we can request and would be reasonable to request. But I think that if we were to put it into the bylaws, where the other 11 communities that make up the vocational school may not have that requirement, it may create problems for the governance of the schools to how things are done. We can certainly request it as an optional item. I'm just not sure that we want to mandate that they do something for Wakefield in this way. We already are putting different demands on the school as it physically resides within the town. Tom, any thoughts on that from a legal perspective?
No, my thoughts are the same as yours, Dan.
So I think that these are, as far as relates to education, are really good suggestions, Eric. And I would recommend that for the vocational school, you contact the school committee representative from Wakefield and request that information, request that they request it so that it can go into the annual report. I'm quite confident if that were submitted to the town administrator for inclusion, it would get included. Certainly a great idea. And if it starts to get included, it becomes a more regular type of activity. Similarly, if you were to go to the superintendent of the Wakefield Public Schools and request a copy of effectively the program for graduation be included, he would most likely, agree that that's something that could be included and do it. Or if he has reservations, he would have that discussion. I'm just not sure that by bylaw we would want to make changes to those components. That's my 2 cents. Others on the committee, thoughts?
I would agree with not getting that prescriptive on the requirements that are in here, because also just thinking some of the other areas that are listed, it opens up the possibility in the future to go down a similar path for those, which I don't know that we would want to do.
Does that make sense, Eric?
I'm grateful for having this chance to present the article to the whole committee. I have two more points in finance.
Please go for it.
I would like to change the position of the retirement board. It appears on page 27, because it's really done by something other than the treasurer or the accountant. You have a retirement board. But when I specified it in the list of things, I put it in with the finance down at the very end. So I would have this moved to general government where it appears. So that's a change in position. I have another thing also. There was a line item in the governmental funds balance sheet called intergovernmental breakdown, and it totaled something like $16 million. And I said, what is all this? So I asked the accountant with the administrator's permission to put in something known as intergovernmental background. You can see it below my fingers backwards, but and if you can read numbers backwards, you see that. And they've done it, he's done it for 10 years on my suggestion. I'm so happy about that, because it saves a question at town meeting. It saves doing something, and it's something, and 16 million should be described in some detail. So I would formally mention the governmental background up in the financial section. That's it.
Okay, so let's take those one at a time. So the change of position for the retirement board, if in practice it's not dealing with finances, perhaps that could be it can be moved.
It appears already up in general government.
Okay. In which case administratively, that seems like a clerical type of change
Yes,
that can be made.
They did it one year put it in the finance, and I thought that's a logical place, but I was wrong. So it's a correction to change it to the way it's done, but 9 times out of 10.
So on that suggestion, Tom, is that something we can include in the omnibus, just kind of clean up?
Sure.
Thoughts on that? Just moving where it appears?
Sounds like it makes sense.
And then the idea of the intergovernmental breakdown, it sounds like it was a great suggestion. It's useful information. I'm not sure that we necessarily want to mandate it. While the current town accountant is very, very good, Kevin Gill is to certainly be commended for how he manages things and has the ability to break somewhat arcane governmental accounting procedures down to those of us who are lay people to try to understand. I'm not sure that his eventual successor will want to do things quite the same way. And there's some leeway based upon how the departments are run. So I think that the fact that it's been there for 10 years will probably be enough for it to be there, because it's all part of the report of the town accountant. It's just a matter of what is required and whether it's not something that's universally understood what is meant by the intergovernmental breakdown. Because depending upon who you ask, it could be perceived differently. That's my 2 cents on it. So I'm just a bit cautious on whether that should get added to a bylaw per se. Thoughts? But we'll take that story, Eric, and revert it back to the education story, to the education discussion. By having the discussions with people about what should be in the annual report, if you bring it to people, people are open to suggestions. That is absolutely true. And I think that if you go to the VOC and request and recommend that they provide that list of graduates, they will most likely happily do so, because to your point, it is something to be celebrated. You could even request a copy of their graduation program as well, since it does reside within Wakefield. And you could use that as a way to try and gently encourage the Wakefield Public Schools to also include their program. Because the value of the town report isn't so much for the current year as it is in the future when people look at these over time. And that's something that obviously you have experience doing, but the value of looking at a town report from 50 years ago, 100 years ago can be significant. I worked with Councillor Vincent on a discussion, and he actually was pulling up reports from approximately 100 years ago, and it was those old documents for which he was able to gain value. So there is distinct value to adding these components. It's a matter of whether we need to legislate them as opposed to doing them by practice, and that's where the real difference here is. So I think take your example and use it to generate other things, and keep reminding people how important the annual report is. It's not just a bylaw. It's not just a book. It is a living history. Others' thoughts on this? Any further items? Anyone else have other suggestions for Chapter 51? The only other item that I will mention is to the discussion that we were having earlier. Eric, one of the suggestions that was made at your, and I do recall this being at your suggestion, at the town meeting, Chapter 51(2), where is the only place I know of in the bylaws where it talks specifically about the first session of the annual town meeting, and that's where the due date of the annual town report is referenced, because it specifically contemplates that there may be additional sessions of town meeting. So your influence is in the bylaws. It may be a little bit more subtle than you realize, but it is in there in Chapter 51, Section 2. So it is there. The deadline was moved in 2018. That was one of the changes that was requested by the town administrator, to give time for the annual report to be put together and then prepared. So it gives roughly 45 days for the town administrator to get everything pulled together for that annual report. But one of the purposes of the annual report is to have information available for the town meeting itself. Any other suggestions on Chapter 51? So we do have some changes. Those will be incorporated in by Mr. Mullen, or my Lord Mullen, as properly stated. Anything else on this? Anything else on the chapters that we've discussed today? Moving along, item 5, is there any update on Mr. Dabrowski and professional assistants?
No, Dan, I'm afraid I'm not clear on exactly what changes you want to make in the proposal that we saw from Bobrowski. And I don't necessarily mean to burden the whole committee tonight. If you could just email me with your thoughts about what you want to see in that contract, because you had some specific thoughts about the number of meetings that would be attended. Okay.
The short version of it is, and I think we discussed this at a prior meeting, is where the contract contemplates that Mr. Dabrowski would only attend 4 sessions, just to make sure that there will likely be many more sessions by which assistance, and it could be by anyone on his team, is available at, and that I think will serve our needs very well. And if there is something that is deemed out of scope, that there is a way by which an authorization can be done so that if additional time is needed or some such thing, that he has the ability to get appropriately compensated for his time and within the authorized amount by town meeting. And we're not putting him into a place where he's getting into a town that tends to be very detail oriented, and he's not expecting it. If he needs to come back, that another proposal may be expected. And it's really just trying to set up a win-win in the initial contract. That was the summary of the changes. I'm not quite sure how to properly communicate that into contract language.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, let me see what I can do.
Thank you, my lord. Barrister Mullen. Okay, and hopefully if we can get that wrapped, if we can get that to the town council, perhaps sometime in December, or early January, we can then start moving on that fairly soon so that he can start his process and we can do the meetings for the recodification. And that's my hope. Does that seem realistic? Okay, with that, item 6, upcoming dates. There are 3 things I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of. First, gobble gobble on Thursday. Hope that everyone has a truly happy Thanksgiving and enjoys the day. I have thanks for each of you that you spend a couple of hours every few weeks with me and each other, just as we're going through all these bylaws in excruciating detail, but with a lot of benefit. I really do appreciate it. Want to express the thanks is genuine. Hope that we all pause, reflect on what is going on, and that we are all a part of the ability to be part of our own governance. And that's something to really be thankful for. So as we go into Thanksgiving, which has a rich history, especially in this area, I hope that you're able to take some of that history and really think about it and be appreciative of each other and yourselves, that you are a part of governance. You are a part of making our community a better place to live, work, and play and live. Next up, it hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, but there is a holiday stroll, which will be downtown on December 3rd. A shameless plug, there will be music over at the Albion Cultural Exchange. There will be, in addition to a lot of visual art, there will be musical art and some other components on Albion Street. That's Saturday. Should be a fantastic event. Highly recommend attending. It may be cold, so bundle up. And usually a lot of the different vendors have nice warm drinks of either coffee, hot chocolate, and other things. I don't believe the streets will be closed this year, so it'll be a little bit different than it has been in prior years, but it's certainly going to be a great event for kids to just kind of explore and get to see different people. It's one of the times that the town really does come together, and historically it's been a fantastic event to attend. And last item I have is our next meeting by our schedule is December 5th, which is in 2 weeks. That one is currently planned by Zoom. It may, I have had the request to have that as a hybrid meeting, and I am currently working with Town Administrator Mayo to try and make that happen. So there may be the opportunity to be back at Town Hall for those of us who wish to be, and for those who find it easiest to attend by Zoom, that will still be an option as well. And there is no problem with changing modes as you see appropriate. So hopefully we can do that. With that, we have, I believe, everything. Does anyone have a problem with December 5th that they know of? So at that meeting, I figure we will take a look at calendars to see if we want to have a second meeting in December. The second meeting would be on December 19th, which is still a conventional work week, but is the week week before Christmas. We may wish to skip that meeting, and I figure we'll have that discussion at the beginning of the next meeting. So if you can check your calendars, I personally am fine either way with having a meeting or by not having a meeting on the 19th. But if you take a look at as homework for as to what your preference will be for the second meeting in December. So anything that anyone else would like to bring up?
Dan, do you know what chapters we'd be expecting to cover in the next meeting?
So the next meeting itself, expectations, we will leave again chapters 99 and 36 on the agenda, just in case we get feedback from other boards or from the town moderator. But the expectation is that we will actually begin the next section of the bylaws, part 2, known as general legislation, which will be chapters 75, 78, and 82, which talks about alarms, alcoholic beverages, and amusements. Just to be clear, alcoholic beverages are not allowed in the meetings while we're actually doing legislation. If people wish to gather together afterwards to enjoy outside of the meeting itself, there is absolutely no prohibition on that, as long as it's not done in a public space with open containers. So, but that is the section that I anticipate we'll be discussing at the next meeting. The 70, 75, 78, 82. There's a possibility that we may get into chapter 990 as well. Chapter 75 is a long chapter, but I'm not anticipating that there's going to be a lot of meaty discussion about these. There may be discussion about everything from how fines and fees are handled for these pieces and some different pieces, but historically, I don't think that these are overly as significant as some of the other bylaws that we've talked about. But great question. Any other questions, thoughts?
I would like to apologize for the library's vacuum cleaner, which started going at quarter of the hour. And
Eric, no
looking-
need to apologize. No need
No
to
need.
apologize for our library keeping clean. The fact that our library is a magnificent space and that it's able to provide you with the services that you need here, I am personally very appreciative of. If you haven't spent time in our library, it really is a gem. We have one of the best libraries in the state by far. The youth section is absolutely amazing in particular, and the librarians and the staff are extraordinarily helpful. So the fact that they're keeping it clean, it does create some noise. I feel bad for that, but it's something that overall as a public service, they do a great job. So for those of you who have spent time there lately, they really have been doing a fantastic job of maintaining.
I point out that they've given me a halo.
They've done that as well. Well deserved.
A square,
And
just like me.
so with that, Eric, would you like to make the one motion, and we're going to have a vote for this meeting, and that will be would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I have been promoted to move that. I move that we meet at the date and time that the chairperson suggested.
Okay, so we'll take that as a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to give that one to Tim. And it's as fast as you tried to be on that square one, Tim.
I was
So
always
Tim
quick on town council.
Tim gets the credit for that. So I'm just going to go in the order in which I see people on my screen for the motion to adjourn. Joe,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we have a unanimous vote for adjourning. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned at 9 o'clock. We will see everyone in 2 weeks. And thank you again for all of your hard work. I really do appreciate it. Great discussion.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Take care.
too bad.
Thank you.
Bye.